Hello, this is Andrew with A Million Bike, and obviously I'm outside, and I apologize for the noise. Hopefully the air conditioner turns off soon, and hopefully the birds stop chirping, although that's not too bad. This is a video about cutting the steerer in my Tarmac without having to take the bike too far apart. So basically, because this hydraulic hose is internally routed, it's kind of difficult to cut the steerer. So that's what all this apparatus is. This is not the right way to do it. What I'm going to do here, the best way is to actually disassemble all this stuff, but that just seemed like more work than it was worth. So I'm going to try this. When I originally built this bike, I only had one working arm. So I had a friend cut the steerer at a pretty conservative height, but now that I have two working arms, I've been steadily lowering the handlebars to increase the drop, and now I have 15 mil, so a big spacer and a little spacer that I want to get rid of because it's kind of unsightly, but also, even though the expander plug in here does kind of go down to about here, ideally I want it to be all the way in the stem to support the stem. This is a little bit easier than starting from scratch, because when you start from scratch you have to measure everything, but I know exactly how much I want to cut, which is 15 millimeters, because this spacer is 10 millimeters and this spacer is 5 millimeters, and I want to leave a 10 millimeter spacer on top of it just to have that little extra pad should I ever need to go back up, and then also to support the tube, the steerer tube, from the compression that comes from the stem. To do this, you'll need a few tools. A vise is strictly optional but highly recommended. So is the saw guide, a hacksaw with a carbon-friendly blade. You don't have to get the Park Tool one, but I looked around and you can get this for the right thing for cheaper, but I just wanted to make sure that I had the right thing, so I got the Park Tool blade and the Park Tool hacksaw. When you put it back together again, you'll want a torque wrench, obviously some hex keys to take it apart, and grease and assembly paste, put it back together again. Depending on your tolerance for cleanliness, some gloves and a rag, and of course a mask. Fortunately, these are pretty easy to find right now because carbon dust is really bad for you. Optional as well is some sandpaper, or if you have a very fine file, you can use that too, just to clear up any burrs that might be on the steerer tube. And then, because I have a Specialized bike, and Specialized has the strangest expander plug that I'm aware of, I need a hammer, and I need a little tool that I manufactured in order to take it apart. So let's get started. So I said 15 mil, and you'll see if I hold this up here, you'll see that this actually comes up a little bit higher than the top of the expander plug. And the reason for that is that this comes down. So you actually need to make sure that you plan for this space for this to come down so that you can get preload on the bearings when you put it back together again. So I have this set to 15, and once I pull this expander plug out, I'm just going to mark this down, and you'll see here again that this goes a little bit below this 10 mil spacer, and that's exactly because that's where I need it to be. And that's what makes it a little bit easier here, because you don't have to figure that out. Now normally with an expander plug you just kind of pull it out, but that is not how Specialized expander plugs work, or at least not the Specialized plug on this Tarmac, which is why I need the hammer, or one of the reasons why I need the hammer. All right, finally. So you have to get this guy to release, and it's a pain. But once it's released, that just comes right out. This is where the gloves come on, because there's going to be grease and assembly pasted. So it's a good time to clean your bearings, as long as you're messing around here too. So we'll get to that in a bit, which is why that rag is here. Okay, so now's when we have to measure our 15 mil, and obviously we want to be very, very careful to get this right. All right, so when we have our 15, we want to measure it again in a few different places. And see, when I tighten that up, it actually moved a little bit. All right, so that's 15. Try that again, just to make sure. 15. 15. 15. Okay. So, mask on. And it's cutting time. Hopefully you can all see what I'm going to do here. Basically, I'm going to hold this like that, just to make sure that when the saw goes through, I'm supporting this bit so that it doesn't tear off. Here's where the sandpaper comes into play. We just move the fork forward, and we're going to clean up these edges there. That was carbon assembly paste, just to make sure nothing slips. There we go. So you can see that this is now, I mean, it still has 10 mil on top of that, but it used to have that stacked up on there too. So that's a little bit more attractive, I think. So the question I'm sure you're all dying to know is, how much weight did I save by cutting the steerer tube? Well, there's the tube itself, which was 4.1 grams, then a spacer and a spacer. So 8.4 grams